Hello there, it's Gabby here from Confidence After Cancer, and I hope this finds you well. This week's podcast, I've got a wonderful guest for you, and we're talking about a topic that I hadn't really thought about a lot until I met Brooke, and that is healing your inner child. Now, what's that mean? It all sounds a bit woo-woo, but if you think about it, we all carry around with us our past experiences, things that have happened to us, things that were said to us when we were children. And that can be really, really positive. You know, hopefully, if you've had a good upbringing, parents that loved you, you've been given lots of positive information about how great you are, how beautiful you are, how wonderful you are as a human being. But unfortunately, for a lot of us, it might be teachers, it could be parents. We've got some stuff that we're carrying around with us that is not so positive. And it's not always something that's happened bad. It could be a really minor thing there. You know, a teacher said to you, oh, you're not sporty, you're not academic. People make these throwaway comments to children. And sometimes that comment can really affect people in later life. And Brooke's going to talk to us about the work that she does in helping people unpack that, not dwell on the past and talk about how awful it was, but just to accept what's happened, understand it a little bit, and maybe do some therapy with her or do some talking just to work it through and really understand, put that comment or that event, whatever it is that you're carrying around with you from your childhood, put it into context, because you're not that person anymore. But we all have memories. We all have things that we carry around with us, some good, some bad. But let's get rid of those negative things that are holding you back. And I know for me personally, things have held me back for a while. That little voice that said, well, who do you think you are? And who do you think you are to start a podcast? And who do you think you are to go on Facebook Lives? Who do you think you are to write a book? Blah, 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 blah. All the things that we think, who do you think you are? Well, I'm telling you now, you are a wonderful person. You've got talent. You've got gifts to share with the world. So don't shrink. Don't play small. Whatever your gifts are, I hope you enjoy this week's podcast. It's a belter, and Brooke is a lovely woman with some really thought-provoking things she's going to share with us. So make yourself a cup of tea or coffee, whatever your drink is. Hello there. So on this week's episode of Confidence After Cancer, I've got a really interesting guest who's got a subject for us today that I want to know more about. I've heard about this thing about healing your inner child. And so I've got Brooke with us today who's going to explain a little bit more about that, what it means and how it can help you. Because I think for a lot of us, we carry stuff, I don't know if that's the right word, we carry stuff around with us from our childhood. I know I do. I can hear my mother's voice in my head sometimes telling me off or telling me things that happened a long, long time ago. And it's still there. And as much as some of us, like me, have done therapy or done counselling or coaching, some stuff still lingers. And I think Brooke's going to talk to us today about how we can work with that and what we can do about that. So welcome, Brooke. It's so good to see you today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Great stuff. So what does it actually mean then, healing your inner child? What's that all about? If you'd like to tell our listeners about that.
Yeah, if you've grown up as a child, especially if you've been in a very traumatic situation where you've had a parent that's physically there but emotionally kind of absent, when you do things, you can have inner child wounds, and there's 4 core main ones: not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, not feeling lovable, or not feeling important. So as a child, if you had something that you wanted to like express some feelings, like you were upset or you were sad, and you went to a parent and they said, oh, stop crying, babies cry, children don't. So you kind of squish those feelings down, you don't express them. And we are, as human beings, supposed to express our feelings rather than suppress them. But we tend to suppress them, and they end up being wounds. We end up feeling that we're not good enough, that we're not important, that what we have to say and what we feel isn't important in life. And we can carry that on into our adult life. So we can end up being like people pleasers and saying things that our parents want us to hear so that we can get some sort of validation from them. So it's those core wounds of when we go to talk about something, there's that age of saying that boys don't cry and good girls don't get angry. So if you want to express something because you feel angry as a child and your parents said, no, you can't be angry, it's bad to be angry, we end up pushing that down and suppressing it, which end up turning out into a wound, thinking, well, why am I not good enough to express how I feel? So it's those sorts of things. And it can happen, I grew up with a very narcissistic mother that kind of put me down and didn't validate me at all through my childhood. So I had like huge inner child wounds. But it can also happen with, if you've got well-meaning parents that don't always realize what's happening and what's going on. And I will mention it sort of throughout the talk, but I wrote a book about how you can break through the self-sabotage cycle. And in there, I talk about a lady that had a trauma from her childhood when she was 7, when a teacher, when she was doing a sum on the board, she got it wrong, and the teacher threw the board rubber at her and said, "You're rubbish at maths." And, you know, up until the age of 7, we don't have that critical faculty to reason, well, maybe the maths teacher had a bad day, maybe he had an argument with his partner, maybe, you know, he tripped over the cat or got a flat tire or whatever. So it's realizing that then we think, well, because they're like an authority figure, well, they must be right. So we internalize that. And up until the age of 50, she just thought that she was useless at maths and got everybody else to do things maths related. But she needed a maths qualification to get a promotion. So she called me in to like help her to sort it out. So we then like sort of worked out where the story come from and worked through it. And it's quite funny actually, because she had to do a maths and an English exam. I said, "Do you want some help with the English?" She went, "No, I'm fine with English." And she ended up passing the maths exam and failing the English, which was quite ironic, really. But it's understanding that, you know, it can be one sentence that somebody says, or it can be like, you know, loads of traumatic events. And it's not the event that happens, it's how we feel about it and how we think about it afterwards and how it's dealt with, you know, because we all have some kind of traumatic event in our life. A lot of them we can process there and then and deal with them. But if they're not processed and dealt with, like, for instance, when my granddad died when I was 6, I mean, he was my whole world. He was my hero. And I desperately wanted to go to the funeral to say goodbye. But my parents said, "No, children don't go to funerals." You know, and back in like the 70s, that wasn't a thing, that children went to funerals and things like that. And they probably thought they were kind of like helping me by not being around all this. But I really wanted to go and say goodbye to him. And for years, I felt like I hadn't had that closure. And I remember as an adult going back to his grave and then kind of like saying my own goodbye to him and sort of like having that closure. So it can be from all sorts of different things. An inner child wound can happen when a child is bullied at school and they don't feel good, so then they go to the teacher and say, "Oh, no, don't be silly. He didn't mean it that way." And your feelings aren't validated and you can't express them.
Yeah, so much of what you've just said rings true, both for myself and people that I work with as well. And I think one of the themes that comes up time and time again with people that I work with that are struggling, you know, later in life, maybe in the 50s and 60s, is that feeling of not being worthy. And quite often, you know, that's a really stark example that you just gave us about the maths thing, and that's something you could pinpoint. And I'd imagine for a lot of people, they can't really pinpoint where it started. So how do you break that down? How do you unpack that? How do you get back to sorting that out if you're not quite sure where it came from? But why do I think I'm not as good as other people? You know, I hear that a lot.
Yeah, well, I often talk about people having beliefs and thoughts that they've inherited from other people. You know, trauma can go back 7 generations. So what our parents said to us and what our grandparents said to us, they're repeating stuff, and we often don't question it, because if it's not serving us, we think, well, that's the way it's always happened in my family. And if I had £1 for everybody I came across that said that, I'd be a lot wealthier than I am now. But we don't ever get curious and question, actually, where's that come from? And again, in the book, I tell a story about, and it's quite a funny one really, is about a couple, and the wife is cooking a ham, and she cuts the end off the roast ham. And the husband said, "Well, why are you doing that?" She said, "Well, because my mum always done it." And he said, "Well, I'm going to ask your mum why she done it." So he phones the mother up and said, why do you cut the end off your ham when you cook it? She said, "Because my mum always did it." So he said, "Right, I'm going to phone grandma and find out what's going on." And the grandmother said, "I cut the end of my ham because my roasting tin is too small." So she had a reason that served her why she did it. But because her daughter watched her do it whenever she cooked a roast ham, she thought that's just the way it was, even though the daughter and the granddaughter had big enough roasting tins, so they didn't need to cut the end off the ham. So, you know, that's kind of a funny illustration of actually getting people to think, okay, well, what am I doing that I don't need to do, but I'm just doing it because it's always happened in our family that way, and that's the way it's been, and I've never questioned it. So one of the biggest things I get my clients to do is get really, really curious. Those stories that you're running through your head, you know, some people call it the inner critic. And I like to help people to think about, instead of it being an inner critic, it's a little scared 5-year-old version of you thinking, what we doing here, what's happening. And when we can think like that, instead of thinking, okay, I just need to push these thoughts away and get on with it, get curious. Where have these thoughts come from? Where have these beliefs come from? Because my beliefs I grew up with, because my mother used to say to me, I was ugly, worthless, I'd never amount to anything, nobody would ever love me. But they were her projections, because she'd got really deep in a childhood and she was projecting onto me. So they were her beliefs, but they're not my beliefs. So I then changed my beliefs to have beliefs that serve me and helped me move forward. So it is a case, I feel sometimes a bit like a detective. We kind of like unpick everything and discover where it comes from, because once you're aware of where it's come from, even if it's come from like, your great grandparents, then it's like, oh, okay, that may have served them then, but actually it's not serving me now, how I want to live my life in this generation. So it's all about getting really, really curious about, actually, is that true, that belief that I'm running? It's a bit like a computer system. Every now and then we have to like reset our computers and sort of like do a cleanup. But we never think to do that with our own bodies and mind. We don't think, oh, are the things I'm thinking and believing and feeling, are they serving me? Are they helping me move forward, or are they keeping me stuck?
Yeah, I love that. I love so much in what you've just said. I would wonder though, for some people, and I'd had quite a dark childhood. I won't go into that now, but when you talk about going back and understanding where things have come from, is that not sometimes like a little bit scary for people to think, well, I don't want to go back there because I'm grown up now. I should have dealt with this, and I don't want to hear those voices again because they upset me so much at the time, or they were so traumatic. I've done a lot of work to try and forget them. I don't want to think about them anymore.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I do it in a way that doesn't re-traumatize anybody, because I've been through trauma myself, and I would never want to traumatize anybody. But it's just we just get curious about the thoughts. So, like for instance, when I went to do a Facebook Live on my personal profile, I had this voice saying, what will people think? So it's like we then pick up, where does that phrase, what will people think of me, come from? Who said that to you? And then it's like, okay, well, if your mother said that to you, where did she get it from? So we kind of like just look at the actual saying rather than go through the actual traumatic events that have happened. So once we realize, oh, that was what my grandmother always used to say, oh, that was her saying, so it's not mine, so I can have a different one. And you actually detach from it and realize that that's not you, that's not who you are. It was just something that you used overheard as a child. Now, I have so many people come to me and say, I'm stupid. I'm like, oh my goodness, okay. So, where's that come from? Well, because I overheard my mum and my auntie saying that my sister was a clever one, therefore I'm the stupid one. But children tend to put 2 and 2 together and come up with 5. It's how it's perceived. Like I had a client once who had an issue with money, a real strong money block. And she said, but I don't get it because my parents were really kind, loving parents. I'm like, that's fantastic. But let's see where that story's come from then. And when she was little, her parents used to pay her pennies when she did jobs around the house to help her to learn the value of money. So the parents thought they were doing a great job helping her to learn the value of money. But as a child, she perceived that she was only worth pennies. So she'd put 2 and 2 together and come up with 5.
Wow.
So when we realized that, it completely changed, and we worked through that. And then she went on to earn the money that she wanted to earn, because she realized actually she wasn't worth it, just pennies. It was her parents, doing the best they can. And sometimes it is, something somebody will say, and they either say it in a jokey way and don't mean it, but it depends on how we're feeling emotionally. We can take it a completely wrong way as a child, and it sticks because an adult said it, so it must be true. And it's like understanding that our parents, we often put them on a pedestal, but actually they're human beings too. And they've got their own inner child wounds, and they're just dealing with whatever they're dealing with and the beliefs that they got from their parents and their grandparents.
Wow. Yeah. So that rings so true. And I think for me as well, because now I'm a mother and I'm a grandmother, and I'm very, I'm acutely aware that, my childhood wasn't great, and I don't want to pass that on to my sons and to my grandchildren. And so a lot of what you're saying, though, is not particularly cruel. It's not particularly nasty. It could be construed as being quite well-meaning. And I think a lot of these things have probably been said with all good intentions, haven't they? With somebody trying to keep you safe as a child, or protect you, or give you good advice, what they perceive as good advice. So it doesn't always come, again, from a dark place, does it? It doesn't always come from abuse. It can come from love.
Yeah. It's understanding that when our parents say things like, my mother used to say, oh, you can't wear that, what will the neighbours think, which I was sort of a bit strange anyway, because I grew up on a farm and our nearest neighbour was like the farm down the road, so we didn't technically have neighbours. But now as an adult, I realised it was her inner child wounds of not feeling good enough as a parent if I didn't dress in a way that kind of like conformed to normality, because I was a real tomboy. I was a jeans and t-shirt type of girl. But if she said, go get a dress on and get dressed up to go out, I'd wear all sorts of different colours together. And she said, you can't wear that. What will people think? Now, that brought me into, like, in my adult life, like, oh my goodness, I can't do a Facebook Live because what will people think of me? Do they think I'm showing off or whatever? So that stayed with me, even though it was my mother's inner child wounds of not feeling, that people perceive her not being good enough as a parent. So we always had to be like perfectly dressed, perfectly presented. So that soothed her inner child wound of feeling good enough as a parent. So it's understanding that often it's somebody else's inner child wounds that are being projected onto us, and it's not our stuff that we're actually dealing with. And when my clients realize that, I see like the sigh of relief, thinking, oh, okay, so I can have my own beliefs and I can live the life I want and how I want to think about it. So it's getting really curious, because the thoughts that pop into our head, it's a bit like if you've got a little 5-year-old, if anybody's ever been around a 5-year-old and they want your attention, they're like, mum, or auntie, or whoever. And they don't stop until you actually acknowledge them. And if you don't acknowledge them, they just get louder and louder and louder until you kind of go, what? And it's so like that with our thoughts that pop into our head and our beliefs. If we kind of like just try and ignore them and push them away, they will keep coming back stronger and stronger. But actually, if you acknowledge them and think, is that actually true? Now, I had it once. I remember getting mic'd up at the back of a room to go on stage to share my story. And this little voice popped into my head and said, what do you think you're doing? Now, if that had been like 15, 20 years ago, I'd have probably burst into tears and ran into the toilet crying, thinking, I don't know. But actually, now, because I'd done the work, I thought, right, what we're doing is we're going to go on stage, share my story, and we're going to impact and inspire some of these people. Even if it's only one person, my job here will be feel like I've done something. And with that voice quieting down, because often it's our inner child, our really scared inner child saying, oh, no, we can't really do that because, when we were 6, when we did that kind of thing, we got into trouble. Like with me, if I spoke out as a 6-year-old, I got into trouble. So speaking out on a Facebook Live was like, my body was going, no, because logically I knew that I'd got the skills and the knowledge. But when you've got those inner child wounds, it's stored in your body, and your body reacts like it was when it was 5 or 6, when it didn't have the understanding and the control to like do anything about it. But now as an adult, we have the opportunity to do something about it. And how I work is we have us, our adult self as our true self, we have our inner child, and we have what I call parts. Now, these parts can be things like procrastination, perfectionism, self-sabotage, emotional eating, anxiety, depression, anger, stress, worry, all those array of things. And they're basically when you're feeling you want to step out and do something and your inner child feels scared, like they're not good enough or worthy, these protector parts come in to protect that inner child. Because they see you as like that 5 or 6-year-old. And it's a bit like there's an army of them. So, okay, right. If Brooke does that Facebook Live, she's going to feel unworthy and not good enough, and that's too painful. We'll let her procrastinate because that's safer and it doesn't hurt so much. Even though the outcome isn't that great, they always come with good intentions. So it's a bit like if you've got a physical wound cut on your arm, you will cover it with a plaster or a band-aid to protect it, so it's kept safe, so nothing can get in it and poke it and make it worse or cause any more harm to it. And that's what these protector parts do. But it's understanding that when these protector parts come up, so instead of saying, I'm angry, it's like a part of me is angry. We get curious, okay, why has that anger come up? What is our inner child trying to tell us? Because it's always giving us feedback and data. Okay, there's something going on. So our inner child needs some help. So we can then reparent our inner child and give it that love and validation that it wanted, that it didn't get as a 5 or 6-year-old. So it's understanding that we can actually reparent ourselves and then heal that inner child wound. So if you suddenly feel angry for no reason, it's often because people's emotions have been suppressed and we're like a container, you know, they're suppressed, but they suddenly build up, and eventually it will overflow, and we'll just blow up and explode and be angry and think, whoa, where did that come from? And I used to do that quite often, but I didn't understand why. But because I was suppressing all the anger, because good girls don't get angry was what I, you know, grew up hearing. So it's like, I thought it was bad if I showed that I was angry. It's bad, you know. But it's really good to release the anger. You know, obviously not hurting yourself or hurting anybody else. You know, I've often gone into like woods with people and said, okay, just scream out and say, you know, I feel angry, you know, and afterwards they feel so amazing because they've released that out of their body rather than having it sitting in their body and festering, because it will come out in some way. Often, as you know, if our bodies aren't at ease, we end up with disease like inflammation, you know, autoimmune disease, IBS, fibromyalgia, or it will come out as pains. You know, a lot of my clients come to me and they've got pains in their shoulders, in their neck. They suffer with bad headaches, backaches, and it's because that emotion is trapped in their body, and it has to come out in some way or other. And the more we suppress it, the more it will come out as maybe a pain or an illness.
Absolutely, completely agree with that. I mean, I've been on a big journey of learning since my cancer diagnosis about, you know, the way our thoughts can manifest in our disease as well. And I'm a big fan of Louise Hay, and she always talks about that, about how thoughts become, you know, they manifest in disease. I really believe that. And a lot of what you said resonated with me. You know, as a small child, I was told good girls are seen and not heard. And the other big one that is still in there is like, who do you think you are? And another one is she really loves herself. That one, you don't want to be like that woman. She loves herself. That's a terrible thing, to love yourself. And that again was, you know, something that I've had to unlearn as I've got, you know, quite old in life. It's amazing. And again, I don't think some of those things were said with malice. They were said probably to help me and to be a good person, as my mother or my grandmother would say. But it's just amazing how these things carry on. And you're absolutely right about the anger as well. I can really relate to that, about not knowing how to deal with anger. And that's been a big issue for me for a long time. I've been afraid to speak out, and I can't say that because I love the thing about the part of me is angry. Not I am an angry person, but part of me is angry. And how do I deal with that? Yeah, that makes complete sense. I love that. Yeah, I can see that's really valuable work.
And I grew up hearing, oh, you're getting too big for your boots, it'll end in tears, you know. And I remember at school, there was a boy in my class who was very outgoing, and he used to like be kind of like the class clown. And the teacher used to say every day, sit down and shut up. We don't want to hear from you. And I watched him over the years just kind of get smaller and smaller. And then he ended up a very quiet little boy. And, you know, back then in like, you know, the 70s, you know, teaching was completely different to how it is now. But you're thinking, you're stifling that person. Yeah, I understand that she needed to, like, you know, have some kind of control in the classroom. But how she said it completely stifled this young lad. And it was like, was showing the rest of us, okay, to kind of speak out and be us and be our own true self isn't right, because we're going to get in trouble for it. You know, so people are scared to like say how they feel or be who they want to be, or stand out, you know. And that's one of the things that I'm really sort of like help my clients with, is to like celebrate the things, you know, because, you know, I now know, because like when I wrote my book, I decided to write and publish it in 90 days, not to become, you know, like a millionaire out of my book or anything, but I wanted to inspire people to think, what can I do in 90 days? If Brooke can do that, what things can I do? And to me, before the book was even published, it was a success in my eyes, because people were messaging me saying, you know, because you've decided to write your book, I've decided to write mine, or I've gone for a promotion, I've gone for my dream job, I've started a business, I've decided to give up my business and go back to a job because I was happier there. And one person even said, I've decided to ask somebody out on a date because I've been putting it off for ages, but I thought, well, it can't hurt to ask them out for a cup of coffee. You know, and I documented my 90-day journey on Facebook, so everybody saw the ups and downs of it, the real true thing behind the scene. So everybody felt that they came on a journey with me, and so many people got so much out of me just, you know, sharing, you know, the highlights and the lowlights. Like I can remember one post I put out, because I'd put that what I wanted to put was, you know, a thought popping into your head, but I'd actually put pooping but it hasn't obviously come up in the spell check because pooping is a word.
Yeah.
And so several people said, are you going to leave it in there? I said, well, you'll have to buy the book to find out. But that was late on a Friday night I discovered that, and I popped a post out really quick, but so many people had a giggle that, oh, thank you, you've just made my evening. I'm really chuckling over that sort of thing. So to me, that was what it was all about. And I like to get my clients to think, in a different way, because you don't have to live the life that your mother led you, your father led you, your grandmother, grandfather, or whatever. It's your life to live how you choose to live it. And if it goes against the family grain, but it makes you feel good, then talk to your parents and say to them, this is what makes me happy, and live the life that you really want to live. We don't have to live other people's lives just because that's the way it's always been done in the family.
Love that. I absolutely love that, Brooke. And I think as well, I'm sure a lot of the people that work with you or follow you would just love that vulnerability, because we see sometimes people on social media and you just think, oh, she's perfect and she never puts a foot out of place. But that's not real. And if people are looking at that thinking that's how you have to be to do, to run your own business or do whatever they want to do, they need to see somebody like you who's inspirational, saying, yeah, I mess up, but I'm human, so what? I'm over it, and I'm not going to let that destroy me. Just laugh about it and crack on. So I think your book sounds amazing, and I will put a link to your book underneath the show notes as well. So if anybody's interested, they can have a read of your book, because it sounds wonderful. It sounds full of inspiration, full of real life, which is what we all want. We don't want the shiny, oh, look at me, I'm amazing. These are problems that a lot of people have, but there's stuff you can do about it. And I love that about your message. That's really, really good. I really wanted to talk to you about, I know you're doing a boot camp soon. Tell us about the boot camp that you're doing. What does that mean? And how can that help people?
Yeah, it's a 3-day boot camp, and it's online. So wherever you are in the world, you can join in, and it's called Heal Your Inner Child, Heal You. So it's going to be talking a lot more in detail about the inner child wound and how you can start to actually start that healing process. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail about parts and how they work as well with you in your daily life. So it's going to have a separate Facebook group as well for just the people in the boot camp, so there'll be little tasks at the end of each day that they can do and pop in the Facebook group and stuff. And I love doing my boot camps. I do one every January and every September. And by day 2, people are like, oh my goodness, I don't want this to end. I've made so many friends and I've bonded with so many people, because it helps people to realize they're not alone. So many people think, especially if they've had a traumatic childhood, the unspoken word is don't talk about it. And this is one of the reasons that I'm doing these podcasts, is to raise awareness of trauma and take the taboo out of it. Because, if somebody's got a headache, their leg hurts, they'll say, oh, I've got a headache, or my leg hurts, or my knee aches. And people go, oh, okay, have you taken the tablets or whatever about it? But, people don't say, oh, yeah, I had a traumatic childhood and I don't feel good enough to do like a Facebook Live or anything, because the reaction is, oh my goodness, I don't know what to say now because you've just told me you've had like a trauma or whatever it is, because we don't talk about that, like with my very first Facebook Live talking about sort of doing things that were backwards. I was all right doing them in my group, and my coach said, you need to start doing them on your personal profile. And I suddenly went, took a sharp intake of breath, and my shoulders kind of went tense. And that sent a signal to my subconscious mind to say, uh-oh, where's the danger? And what happened was, I thought, right, at the time, because I hadn't really understood how trauma works in the body, it's like, feel that fear and do it anyway. I'd geared myself up. And tech is not my thing. If you get to know me, I've got an amazing tech VA, and it just drains me. So they deal with it. But I was so nervous because I was in that fight or flight response. My camera was around the wrong way, and I just couldn't think because I was in that fight or flight. And when we're in that fight or flight, all the energies goes to your main body to get you ready to either physically fight or run. And my logical brain wasn't switched on. So I just couldn't remember how to switch it around. So I just kind of joked and said, I'm really nervous. It's my first Facebook Live on my personal profile. I can't work out how to flip the camera around. Good job I've hoovered today, because all you're going to see is my carpet. And then I carried on with the Facebook Live, and I had 2 people straight after message me and say, I've been following you for a while, and I'd love to talk to you about some coaching, because I love the fact that you hadn't got a perfect background, you hadn't got perfect lighting, you wasn't really scripted. I could really resonate with you, because that's something I could probably do as well. And it's lovely that you kind of stepped into that mistake you make. And today now, I mean, I was horrified at the time. And like a couple of weeks ago, I did a TikTok, and I realized when I did the title, because I did it quickly, the spell check changed your, as in Y-O-U-R, into Y-O-U''re. So the grammar was wrong. And I didn't notice it until after 6,000 people had viewed it.
Wow.
So, if that had been a few years ago, I'd have gone, oh my goodness, I need to delete that. That doesn't look professional. But my instant thought then, I just sort of chuckled, thought, right, take a screenshot and then do a post about it on Facebook saying, even though I had messed up in the title and the grammar wasn't correct, the message that I had in that TikTok reel resonated with 6,000 people. So it's okay to make those mistakes. It just shows that you're human. And when I do that, I always get people saying, thank you. It feels like, I've got permission to make a mistake and I'm still going to be okay about it, because a lot of people come to me because they'd love to have confidence. And I always say, well, I won't teach you to be 100% confident that you'll achieve X, Y, and Z. But what I will help you with is to be confident that whether you succeed or whether you learn, because I don't say succeed or fail, I always think that we either succeed or we learn. Like with my TikTok reel, I will learn to double check my title before I pop it out in future. That we're going to be okay, regardless of what happened, we're still going to be okay at the end of it. My business didn't collapse. I lived to tell the tale the next day. So, nothing major happened, but it's our perception again and those thoughts in our head that pop in like, oh my goodness, I'm not good enough. What are people going to think about that? And that's when those inner child wounds come in. But because I've healed a lot of those, it's just okay. I made a blooper. Let's share it with the world and let everybody know that. And I love making mistakes now because it helps give me content to help other people to see that we're all human beings at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's okay to make those mistakes and we learn from them.
Absolutely. I love that, Brooke. I think it may be a good message to finish on, but life isn't perfect. None of us are perfect, but you know what? You can learn how to move on from things like that and not let it derail you. And I love what you said before about it's not the event, it's what you make it mean. And I talk about that a lot. Absolutely. We put things into the wrong context sometimes, and that's how, negative thoughts can overtake you sometimes. But actually, you've got a really positive message to share that. I love the sound of your boot camp. I'm definitely going to be looking into that. So good to talk to you today, Brooks. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's speak soon. And I will put the links to all Brooke's socials below the podcast here. As I say, you can check out her book, get in touch with her if you'd like to take anything she said further. Great podcast. Thank you so much, Brooke. I'm sure we'll speak again. Thank you.
I do offer like a 30-minute complimentary call if anybody is interested. So if they do email me, they can have a chat with me and it's complimentary. So feel free to get in touch and I do answer all my emails personally.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure people will be getting in touch. Really got a lot out of today. Thank you so much, Brooke. Take care. Have a wonderful day and let's speak soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Well, what a great podcast we had today with Brooke. So much thought-provoking things that she said to me today that really struck a nerve with me, but also not just for me personally, but people that I work with. And it's really struck home to me, as we get older, I'm 60 now, and things that happen to us as children or things that were said to us as children can still affect us. And that's okay if they're positive things, but if they are negative things or things that are keeping you small or keeping you in a place that you don't want to be, you have got people like Brooke who can inspire you, who can tell you that, your past doesn't have to equal your future. You're never too old to learn something new and to move forward and to become the bright, beautiful person that you were meant to be. And some of these things, that may have been said to you as a child, maybe weren't said with malice, were not said to knock you down, but it's what we make them mean. And I think I talk about that a lot. Sometimes in life, it's not the event that's happened to us, it's how we internalize that and what we make that mean about us. If somebody's told me to be quiet, does that mean I'm not worthy to speak up? No, it doesn't. And so sometimes you have to take things and think about what does it actually mean. I'm not going to let that hold me back anymore. That comment, that thing that happened to me in the past. I have the power now as an adult to move forward. And if I don't feel confident doing that on my own, I can work with a coach. I can work with somebody like Brooke, who's going to help me to move forward and live a beautiful, happy life, which is what we all want. The other thing that I really liked what Brooke said is life's not perfect. She's not coming on here telling you she's the amazing woman who never makes a mistake. And nor am I. I'm not a tech genius either, as you can probably work out. But I've come in here to share my experience. And that's why I started Confidence After Cancer. When I was in a bad place when my treatment finished, I felt alone and I felt guilty and I felt like I shouldn't feel like that. And other people don't feel like this. They all feel great when they finish cancer treatment. Look at them all. They're all getting on with their lives and there's something wrong with me. That's what I made it mean. And it was only when I started talking to other people that I realised, no, not everyone feels like that. Some people do, and that's great. There's a lot of people who need help and support, and that's what I'm all about, and that's what I'm here for. And then I'm just going to leave you with the thought of don't play small. You've got one life, unless you're a Buddhist and you believe you're coming back, but you've got one life. Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't worry about things that don't matter. And just look after yourself, my darling. If nobody else has told you today, I love you. I'm so blessed to have you listening, watching, whatever you're doing. Connect with me, get in touch. If I can help you, amazing. Just let me know what I can do for you. Have a wonderful day. And thank you so much for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.